Let's look at two more examples. First of all, let's decide, are we going to use the inverse trig functions like we did in the other examples, or are we going to use the regular trig functions? So the information that they've given us is an angle and one side, and from that they want us to find the length of another side. So that means that inverse trig functions aren't going to be very helpful here, because what they do is look for an angle. So we're going to use the actual trig functions sine, cosine, and tangent. Now we need to decide which of those three we're going to be using for this first problem. The way that we do that is first identify the sides that they've given us. So across from the 90-degree angle, this is the hypotenuse. Across from the angle that we're looking at, this is the opposite side. So we're dealing with the opposite side length and the length of the hypotenuse. The trig function that deals with that ratio is the sine function. So remember that sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. So what we're going to do is sine of our angle, sine of 37 degrees, is equal to opposite over hypotenuse, or length of the opposite over length of the hypotenuse. In this case, the length of the opposite side is what we're looking for, so that's x, and the length of the hypotenuse is 12. Now we need to isolate x. In order to do that, we need to multiply both sides of our equation by 12. The 12s cancel out over here, and we get that 12 times sine of 37 degrees is equal to x. That gives us a side length of 7.22. 7.22 is equal to x. In the last problems, whenever we were dealing with angles, our measures were in degrees. Now that we're dealing with the lengths of sides, our units would be some sort of length, and it would depend on whatever the units were for the numbers that they had given us in the problem. If they had said that this was 12 feet, then whenever we found our missing side length, it would also be in feet. So that would have been 7.22 feet. But you always have to look back at whatever the units were in the problem. All right, let's look at the next one. Again, we're given an angle, and we're asked to determine one of the sides given the other side. So this is going to be one of our regular sine, cosine, or tangent functions, one of those. We need to identify the sides. So the side over here is the hypotenuse. Over here is the opposite, and the other side that is given to us is the adjacent side. So that means we're dealing with the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. The trig function that deals with adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. Cosine is equal to adjacent, or the ratio of the adjacent length over the length of the hypotenuse. So in this case, cosine of 50 degrees, because that is our angle, is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, or x over 12. We end up with the same number down here. So this problem now looks very similar to what we have up here. As a matter of fact, the steps are exactly the same. We will multiply both sides by 12. So we get 12 times cosine of 50 degrees is equal to x, which means that x is equal to 7.71, and again, the units would be the same as the length that they had given us in the problem. So if this was 12 feet, this would be 7.71 feet. If this was 12 inches, 7.71 inches. So this total, the units of this depend entirely on the units of the given lengths. All right, so that's how we would use the regular trig functions to find a missing side.